Hi, my name is Sean Webb, and today I'm going to discuss with you some of the implications of how far reaching artificial intelligence is going to be in our lives. Now, we won't discuss much math or any math in this particular presentation, but it's going to show you just how deeply artificial intelligence will be able to reach into our personal lives. Now, I've used this slide deck to give training to multiple development teams in the realm of artificial intelligence and artificial emotional intelligence, which is the realm of artificial intelligence specifically designed to serve emotional and effective reactions of automated personalities, and also to define, track, and predict real emotions in actual human users, individuals, at a scale of 8 billion people, at a resolution of what an individual person needs to react emotionally to whatever it is that's going on around them. So using artificial intelligence to help create a computer program that understands a human mind and understands the emotional reactions going on in a human mind is actually simpler than you think. Let's look at it from a 50,000-foot view so you understand how powerful the tools are that you are about to engage in utilizing. So the first thing that I'd like to do is to show you the model of how computers are going to be used to define, track, and predict emotional responses in human beings. And then from there, we'll discuss how artificial intelligence is going to sharpen its model to become more human than human. And when we're talking about using artificial intelligence on the road to becoming more sentient, more conscious, and more human-like to be able to serve our human needs, we need to start with the 50,000-foot view of how emotions work in human beings. Then we'll talk about how computers fit into the mix, and then you'll be able to understand how artificial intelligence will augment that in the future. Now, that 50,000-foot view story about our emotions starts with your brain. Now, your brain is your organ of survival. It is the organ within your body that is most designed to help you survive from one day into the next. Our memory helps us remember where the food and water is. Our cognition helps us to figure out how to build a shelter. Imagination helps us practice mentally for future situations. And within that brain structure is a subsystem called the limbic system. Now, this is a portion of your more primitive brain. It scans the senses and thoughts for threats. It's always looking around you saying, is this a threat? Is this headline a threat? Is this person a threat? Is this idea a threat? And then a second question must be asked within your brain, a threat to what? What is it exactly that we are trying to protect? And the specific answer to that question is something called our mind's sense of self. Now, your mind's sense of self is something that's been identified by multiple neurologists and psychologists as the laundry list of things that must be defended at all costs, originally identified by Antonio Damasio at the University of Southern California, who is now world famous for being able to put some definitions and understandings around human consciousness. Now, it used to be thought that the mind sense of self was limited to the human body. We identified ourselves as the thing that we saw when we looked in the mirror, but then science came along and proved that our sense of self is larger than just our body. For instance, Jim Cohn at the University of Virginia proved that we have extensions of our sense of self that include the people around us, the people that we care about, the people that become part of our lives, which explains why the same systematic wiring in our brain can offer up emotions about people that we care about, such as we can get angry or sad or fearful or worrisome or regretful about things that are associated with other people. Then Tiffany Burnett-White at UIUC proved that we can have connections to brand and ideas of value that become attached to our sense of self. And so we can become Apple or Android people, or we can pick a favorite sports team and have emotional reactions associated with those decisions that we make in life of our preferences, the things that are associated with us. Sam Harris proved that ideas of politics and religion become mapped onto the sense of self, which is why we can have emotional reactions connected with these individual pieces of identity that become a portion of who and what we think we are from our mind's perspective. And this extends to multiple ideas that get mapped onto the sense of self. Our accomplishments, our life story, the things that have happened to us in our life, the things that we identify with all become a portion of our sense of self that must be defended at all costs, lest the brain go into an emotional meltdown. but which also can be clearly quantified by social media and other online platforms that track our activity, track our interests, track our connections, and build this map for us. Information that can then be sharpened by artificial intelligence algorithms that better identify where things need to go on an individual self map so that we can understand how they will have emotional reactions to various stimuli coming in from the external environment, including stimuli that we might line up and engineer and or even fabricate to create emotional responses in individuals that cause them to take actions that we would prefer them to take in various instances. And yes, for those of you paying attention, we are talking about controlling the minds of human individuals in an automated fashion through artificial intelligence application. Now, the simplicity of how a human mind creates all human reactions in a human being is so elementary, it's almost scary. Here are the values that are associated with every emotional reaction that every individual on the planet has from the time of their birth to the time of their death. They have something called their expectation and or preference about any certain something, and then that gets compared to a perception about that certain something. And this is true from the time that we're babies to the time that we're taking our last breath on the planet. The expectation sounds like something that we choose. Preference sounds like something that we choose, but it's not. The expectation and preference is set automatically from the things on our self map, which must be held at status quo or increased in value, lest we have an emotional fallout associated with a perception that's coming through. Everything's got to be held status quo or increased in value, or we're going to lose our patience, lose our cool. And the equation looks like this. Expectation or preference as compared to perception equals an emotional reaction. And in general, when things are balanced in the expectation or preference versus the perception, you have a positive emotion. When things are in an imbalanced situation, then you have a negative emotion. For instance, if we go camping and we expect a bear not to come into our tent and we find that a bear is coming into our tent, then we have a fear reaction associated with the bear entering our tent. If we prefer a certain sports team to win over another team and they do win, then that balances our perception with our expectation or preference, and we have a positive reaction associated with that. If we want to go out and buy the next tech gadget and we expect it to be amazing, and it is amazing, then we have a positive emotion associated with that. If it's not amazing or it's broken out of the box, then we have a negative emotion and a return situation that we have to take it back to the store. And this applies to absolutely everything in our lives. If our relationships in our lives are going well, we're happy. If they're not going well, then we're unhappy. Now, this is a very simplistic equation to try to explain all of our human emotions, but this is indeed how it works. There are some variations within each variable that make it individual and will determine whether different negative emotions or positive emotions are presented, such as fear versus anger versus sadness versus worry versus regret, etc., are all determined by specifics within the variables themselves. But if you break this equation, it does have a negative proof. If you take an expectation or preference out, such as you're watching a sports team and you don't care who wins, and then you find out who wins, you don't have an emotional reaction associated with that specific team win because there was no expectation or preference. You weren't attached to either team or the sport associated with what was going on, the information that you learned that created the perception. The opposite is also true. If you do care about a sports team, but you don't know who won the game and you haven't seen anywhere where the score has been displayed, you will not have an emotional reaction associated with that particular game. You may be frustrated that you don't know the answer to the who won question, which is a different equation of emotion. It is the expectation that you would know the score versus the reality that you don't know the score, and that might be causing a frustration for you. But over the game itself, you will not have an emotional reaction because you do not have both sides of the equation of emotion filled regarding the contest itself. Now, as I said, there are a lot of details that help determine which emotion is in play, but we're not going to cover those. We're going to jump into how computers are going to be able to understand this science moving forward and even exhibit real-world emotions through a simulated personality aided by artificial intelligence. Now, the math on the expectation or preference is easy. Every individual attachment that a person has on their self-map automatically gets assigned an expectation or preference that says everything must be held at status quo or increased in value, or we're going to have a negative emotional reaction. And again, online entities have already been tracking all of our individual attachments for a number of years, over a decade. And so they have a pretty good idea of the things that our mind points to when we think of the idea of self that then can create emotional reactions in us individually. And again, we can use this in two ways. We can create artificial personalities that have real world emotional reactions. And again, I used this slide deck to train the Sophia robot folks so they could have an understanding of how to create artificial emotions for the Sophia robot that got citizenship from Saudi Arabia. We're working on this kind of stuff, and we're going to allow artificial intelligence a role in that improvement of the model. We come with a base model, but then if we're watching an individual with an artificial intelligence algorithm helping to align the things on their self map exactly where they need to be, of how much they care about something, how close they are to someone, how much they believe in a certain idea. Maybe they just believe in it a little bit and it's out towards the edge of the map, or maybe they believe in it a lot based on their vocabulary and online interactions with others, and we can move that specific attachment in toward the center, closer to their heart, closer to their core belief systems, etc. Artificial intelligence can be used to sharpen the map of the individual that we're tracking, where maybe when this person or when this artificial consciousness is interacting with an individual who holds certain beliefs dear, that artificial consciousness can then shape its vocabulary or shape its responses to be more agreeable to the individual that they're talking to. And so that's how deeply this can affect humanity from an interpersonal and life experience perspective, in that we're changing the emotional landscape of the people that we're interacting with based on how we change vocabulary, what subjects we talk about, how we address certain topics within the mind of this individual that we're talking to, because we can now understand what their self map is, as well as what their likely reaction is going to be to certain pieces of information that create perceptions in their mind. And we can now understand, before it happens, how to make people happy, how to make people angry if we need them to be, or how to make people regret a certain action that they took, or feel sad about something, etc. We can now create an emotional landscape in the people that we are dealing with and interacting with. And at the point that we have a perception engine in play that can identify the actions that are going on in the real world, now an artificial personality can react in real time to the activities that are going on in a real world scenario. Appropriate response trees can be generated in the instance of artificial personalities, and mixed responses can simply be mathematically organized into logical reactions connected with whatever's going on around the artificial personality. In addition, we can now create an individual memory stream of conversations and interactions with particular individuals that map to that individual collectively, just like they do in our own human minds, where we had a conversation with a person about a particular subject, and that will only come up when we interact with that subject that individual, as a human mind actually does. It can give artificial personalities an emotional intelligence that is better for that individual to interact with. We can then create a simulated artificial emotional intelligence from the simulated personality who is interacting with real-world human beings. And so now you can see how impactful an artificial learning algorithm can be to human beings' lives once we start to introduce the ability for machines to understand our human reactions and anticipate those human reactions and to alter its responses based on our human reactions. Now we're creating an amazing next step, next level world of artificial interaction with technology, which is really what we're all about here, right? We're wanting to use machine learning to better the human experience based on our understanding of how to help machines teach themselves. Well, in this case, this one's going to be a doozy. This one's going to be extremely impactful in people's lives because it will be able to identify and react to the individual responses required to create a positive experience within that individual, or at least if it doesn't help them feel better, it will help them get what they need to push forward and be a positive force in their lives. When I got into this originally, it was to design a chatbot that could help octogenarians feel like they had someone to talk to when they didn't have anyone to visit them in their old age or in their nursing home, etc. That's what drove me, is to enrich the quality of people's lives. If you're interested in finding out more about how the human mind works so as to apply these learning algorithms to sharpen our understanding of how to better serve humanity, you can go pick up Mind Hacking Happiness, which is a book that I wrote about the human mind and about how it works. I hope this message finds you guys well. I hope you love the heck out of the rest of this course, and I know it's been amazing because my friend Zeeshan doesn't do things halfway. He does things fully immersed. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Peace.